The Weight of Innocence. Part 1. The Fog of Doubt. I woke with a jolt, my heart pounding in my chest. It took a moment for my mind to catch up with reality. My body was still, but my pulse thudded loudly in my ears. The air around me felt heavy, thick with confusion. I didn't recognize the room I was in, or the bed I was lying on. It was all wrong, and I couldn't place why. I blinked, staring at the ceiling. The last thing I remembered was nothing. My mind was blank. There should have been a stream of thoughts, a memory to latch onto, but there was only silence. I couldn't even remember how I got here. Panic surged in my chest as I pulled myself upright. I glanced around. The room was small, sparsely furnished. A cheap-looking dresser, a wooden chair by the window, and an old lamp on the bedside table. It wasn't much, certainly not anything that resembled my apartment. A groan slipped from my lips as I rubbed my temples. My head ached, and there was an odd taste in my mouth. Like metal. I tried to stand, but a wave of dizziness hit me. I stumbled slightly, pressing my palm to the wall to steady myself. Then, I saw it. The blood. It was on my hands. Dark, sticky blood. I froze. My eyes moved slowly down to the hem of my shirt, where more blood stained the fabric, soaking into the material like a cruel reminder. The panic I'd been trying to push down suddenly exploded, spreading through my chest like wildfire. What happened? I whispered to myself, but the words barely formed in my mouth. They seemed so useless, so distant. The blood on my hands couldn't be mine. There was no pain, no injury, no explanation for it. Yet there it was, unmistakable. I felt my breath grow shallow, my thoughts tumbling over one another. Had I done something? Had I been in a fight? But no. I couldn't remember. Nothing made sense. I glanced around the room again, searching for clues, but all I found was more confusion. There was nothing about this place that felt familiar. Nothing that made me feel safe. Then, as if in response to my mounting panic, I heard a noise outside the door. A soft knock, almost tentative. My breath caught, my heart threatening to beat out of my chest. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I didn't know who it was, but it felt urgent, like someone was waiting for me to respond. But who would be looking for me here? Why wasn't I at home? And why had they knocked like they knew I was inside? I hesitated for a moment, then stumbled toward the door. My legs were weak, my whole body unsteady as I gripped the doorknob. The blood still clung to my hands, a sickening reminder of the confusion I couldn't shake. I opened the door just a crack, enough to see the man standing in the hallway. He looked almost out of place, well-dressed, businesslike, but his eyes, they were hard, sharp, cold. "Lena Monroe?" he asked, his voice calm but unwavering. I swallowed, struggling to find my voice. "Why, yes." The word came out like a question, more a reflex than anything else. He studied me for a moment, his gaze lingering on the blood on my hands, then flicking to my face. The look in his eyes made my stomach twist. He didn't seem surprised by what he saw. "You've been through something," he said, his tone flat, like he was stating a fact, not offering any sympathy. "And you don't remember what happened, do you?" I could barely comprehend the question. His words didn't make sense, yet they seemed so real. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "No, I don't remember." A strange silence passed between us. Then, without warning, he stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk." The man didn't wait for me to respond. He walked past me into the room, his footsteps heavy, echoing in the silence between us. He moved with a kind of purpose, like he knew exactly where he was going, while I was still stuck in a fog. He stood still for a moment, studying me. His eyes flicked to the blood on my hands and then to my face, like he was assessing something I couldn't even begin to understand. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. "You don't remember, do you?" he asked again, this time softer, but with an edge of something I couldn't quite place. I shook my head, my throat tight. I don't remember anything. I don't know how I got here." He nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. I was afraid of that. I opened my mouth to ask who he was, why he was here, but he raised his hand to stop me. "You're going to want to read this," he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small piece of paper, folded neatly in half. He handed it to me with an almost unsettling calmness. I took it without thinking, the paper cold in my hands. I unfolded it slowly, almost afraid of what it might say. The words were hastily scribbled, the handwriting jagged and uneven, as though whoever wrote it was rushed. You're innocent, but you'll never remember the truth. I stared at the note, my heart racing again. What did this mean? Why had someone written it? And why was he giving it to me? I looked up at him, searching his face for some clue, but he just stood there, silent, his expression unreadable. Who are you? I finally asked, the question coming out more desperate than I intended. He exhaled a slow breath, like he was considering whether or not to answer. I'm someone who knows you didn't do it. But I can't explain everything right now. Just remember this. There's more at play than you realize. You need to find out what happened. Before I could respond, he turned toward the door. The police will be here soon. Don't try to run. You won't get far. He paused in the doorway, glancing back at me one last time. And don't trust anyone who says they know what happened. They don't. With that, he stepped out, leaving me alone again. Still in the dark, still grasping at the shards of my memories, unsure of who to trust or what to believe. But one thing was certain, the man was right. I needed to figure out what happened, even if it meant uncovering a truth I might not want to face. The silence in the room felt suffocating after the man left. I couldn't stop staring at the note he'd given me. The words echoed in my mind. You're innocent, but you'll never remember the truth. I wasn't sure what scared me more, the note itself or the fact that I was starting to believe it. How could I be innocent when I didn't remember anything? What was I supposed to do with a message like that? The knock at the door came suddenly, almost as if it were a response to my frantic thoughts. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. Who could it be? Was it the man returning? Or was it someone else, someone who could explain all of this? The knock came again, louder this time. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move toward the door. My hands were shaking. Blood still clung to my fingers, a grim reminder of the chaos I was caught in. I opened the door just a crack, enough to see two police officers standing in the hallway. One of them, a man with short, graying hair and a stern expression, stepped forward. The other, a younger woman with a tight ponytail, remained slightly behind him. Lena Monroe? The man asked, his voice authoritative, like it was a statement rather than a question. I nodded, barely able to get my voice out. Yes, that's me. The woman's gaze flickered to the blood on my hands, and her eyes hardened slightly. We need to talk to you, she said, her tone impassive. About what? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I was still in shock, still trying to process everything that had happened. The man gave a short, clipped answer. About the crime. I felt my stomach lurch. Crime. The woman took a step forward. A murder. And you're the prime suspect. My breath caught in my throat. I don't know anything about a murder, I stammered, shaking my head. The words didn't feel real. I don't even remember what happened last night. The man's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. We're going to need you to come with us to the station, Ms. Monroe. I backed away from the door, almost stumbling over my own feet. Wait, please, you don't understand. I didn't do anything. The woman's gaze softened for a split second, but it quickly hardened again. We don't know that for sure yet. You're not under arrest, but we need to question you. It's procedure. I wanted to argue, to scream, to tell them that something was wrong. But the blood on my hands felt like it weighed me down, and I couldn't make sense of anything. How could I be accused of murder when I had no memory of the night before? The man stepped forward again, his voice firm but not unkind. Come with us, and we'll sort this out. I hesitated, but the urgency in his tone made it clear I didn't have a choice. I glanced one last time at the blood-stained apartment, my mind racing. Whoever had done this had left me with nothing but questions. And now, I was being pulled deeper into something I didn't understand. With a shaky breath, I nodded. Okay, I'll go. They led me out into the hallway, and as the door clicked shut behind me, I couldn't help but wonder if I was walking straight into a trap. But I had no other choice. The ride to the station felt like it took hours, even though it was only a few minutes. The police car was silent, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional shift of the officers in their seats. I sat in the back, my hands still trembling and gripping the edges of the seat as though it might offer some kind of security. I kept replaying the words from the officers in my head. You're the prime suspect. A murder. And they thought I did it. But I didn't. I couldn't have. I didn't even remember anything from the night before. How could they even think I was guilty? I looked out the window, watching the buildings blur past as the car drove through the quiet streets. The world felt so distant, like I was watching everything from behind a thick sheet of glass. I was part of this world, but at the same time, I wasn't. I felt disconnected, lost. Just as I was about to turn and ask the officer in the front seat something, anything, to help me understand what was happening, the car abruptly stopped. I glanced up, startled, to see that we were parked on the side of the road. The officer in the front seat turned his head and gave me a cold, unreadable look. "Wait here," he said shortly before stepping out of the car. Before I could respond, the woman, the younger officer, followed him, leaving me alone in the back seat. My mind was racing. Why had we stopped? Why were they leaving me here? A moment later, a man appeared from the shadows, stepping from between two parked cars. His features were partially obscured by a dark hoodie and the dim light, but I could make out the same sharp eyes I'd seen earlier, the man from the apartment. The one who had given me the cryptic note. My heart skipped a beat, and I leaned forward in the seat, pressing my hands to the cool window. Was it really him? He didn't seem surprised to see me. In fact, his expression didn't change at all. The only movement was the faint twitch of his lips, like he knew something I didn't. He glanced quickly at the police car, then back at me. "You need to listen carefully," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They're not going to let you go. They've already made up their minds. But you need to trust me. You didn't do this." I stared at him in confusion, trying to make sense of his words. "Who are you?" My voice was almost a whisper, but I couldn't contain the question. My mind felt like it was going to explode. Who was he, and how did he know that? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer to the car and glanced around, making sure no one was watching. The officers were still out of sight, behind the building. This was my only chance to hear what he had to say. "You don't remember," he continued. "But they're going to make you believe you did. They've been setting this up for months. Whoever is behind this knows exactly how to manipulate your memories. They know how to make you think you've committed a crime you didn't." I shook my head, trying to clear away the haze in my thoughts. My head was spinning. "What are you talking about? How do you know any of this? How do you know me?" He leaned in closer to the window, his breath fogging up the glass for a second. His voice dropped even lower, as if to make sure no one else could hear him. "I know more than you think. The truth is buried in your past. If you don't remember, I'll help you. But you have to trust me." I wanted to scream, to ask so many questions, but his words held me captive. Something about him, his calm certainty, made me feel like he wasn't lying. But I didn't understand how any of this was possible. "Please," I whispered. "I don't know what's happening. I don't remember." He straightened up, giving me a serious look. "You will. But only if you find the answers. You have to look deeper, Lena. You're innocent. Don't let them make you believe otherwise." Before I could respond, the officers appeared in the distance, moving back toward the car. He stepped back into the shadows, blending with the night. I was left sitting there, trembling, the weight of his words pressing down on me. My mind raced, but all I could do was wait for the officers to return and take me wherever they planned to take me next. But one thing was clear: the man who had spoken to me knew something I didn't. And somehow, I had to figure out what it was before everything slipped beyond my reach. I didn't know what to expect when we arrived at the station, but I never imagined it would feel like this. The sterile, cold walls of the interrogation room seemed to close in on me as I sat down at the table. The bright overhead light buzzed faintly, casting sharp shadows across the room, making everything feel even more oppressive. The officers hadn't said much during the drive. They just exchanged occasional glances, as if they were communicating in some unspoken language I wasn't privy to. I tried to read them, but their faces remained impassive. I didn't even know if they believed I was innocent or guilty. The door opened with a creak, and a man walked in, his suit neatly pressed and his face as unreadable as the officers. He was tall, with graying hair at the temples, and he carried himself like someone who was used to authority. "Ms. Monroe," he began, his voice cool, professional. "I'm Detective Andrews. I'm sure you have questions. We'll get to them, but first, I need to hear your side of things." I swallowed, my throat dry. My side. I don't know what happened. I don't remember anything. Andrews didn't seem fazed by this. He simply nodded and took a seat across from me, folding his hands in front of him. His gaze didn't waver as he studied me. "Tell me what you remember." "From the night before," he said, his tone still calm, but there was an underlying tension there. I hesitated. How could I tell him something when I didn't even know myself? I shook my head, trying to gather my thoughts. I don't remember. I woke up in a strange apartment. There was blood on my hands, and I don't know how I got there. I don't know what happened. Andrews didn't blink. He simply watched me, his face like a mask. The blood, Ms. Monroe. That's what concerns us. It was at the scene of the crime. I flinched, feeling the weight of his words like a physical blow. But it wasn't mine. I swear I didn't. He cut me off with a raised hand. I didn't say it was. We'll figure that out. But you need to understand the gravity of the situation. Someone is dead, and you were found in close proximity to the body. You're the last person we know of who was with them. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't with anyone. I don't even remember. Tell me about your relationship with the victim then, Andrews interrupted, leaning forward slightly. Start with what you do remember. My mind raced. Victim. I had no idea who he was talking about. I didn't recognize the name he mentioned when he first entered the room, and I couldn't piece together the details. Who was this person, and why was I involved? I don't know who the victim is, I said finally, my voice trembling now. I don't know anything about them. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans, trying to steady myself. I swear, I don't remember being with anyone. Andrew's gaze didn't soften, but his voice dropped, becoming almost too calm. The victim was a man named Peter Granger. He was found in his apartment late last night. According to our sources, you were the last person to see him alive. I stared at him, my mind blank. Peter Granger? I don't know him. I don't know anyone by that name. A long pause stretched between us. I could feel the weight of his scrutiny, and it was suffocating. I wanted to break, to tell him everything, but I couldn't, because there was nothing to tell. Ms. Monroe, Andrew said, his voice cold now. We have your prints at the scene, your DNA. The evidence is stacking up against you. You need to start cooperating if you want to help yourself. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The panic clawed at my chest again. What was I supposed to say when I couldn't even remember who the victim was, or how I'd ended up covered in blood? I was caught in a web I didn't understand, and every attempt to untangle myself only seemed to make it worse. Please, I whispered. I swear, I didn't do this. I don't know what happened. Detective Andrews gave me a long look, his eyes narrowing slightly as though he didn't believe me, or maybe he was trying to decide whether or not to press harder. Finally, he stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. We'll continue this tomorrow. I suggest you think long and hard about your memory, Ms. Monroe. The truth is your only chance out of this. I watched him leave, the door clicking shut behind him. And just like that, I was alone again. But the truth, what little I knew of it, was slipping farther away from me with every passing minute. The hours stretched on like an endless nightmare. I was left alone in the cold, fluorescent-lit room for what felt like an eternity. My mind kept looping back to the same questions, the same terrifying uncertainties. How had I ended up at the scene of a murder? Why couldn't I remember anything? And why did the officers seem so sure I was involved? I barely noticed when the door opened again. I was too consumed by the quiet hum of my thoughts, too deep in the whirlwind of confusion that had been my constant companion since I woke up with blood on my hands. When I looked up, Detective Andrews was standing in the doorway, a folder in hand. His face was still that same unreadable mask, but something in his eyes had changed. There was a new edge to him, a subtle shift that made me feel like I was on the brink of something I couldn't control. Ms. Monroe, he said, his voice almost too smooth. It's time to move forward. We need to talk more about the victim. I blinked at him, trying to shake off the fog that clouded my mind. You said his name was Peter Granger, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know him. I don't remember him. Andrews didn't respond right away. He opened the folder in his hands and pulled out a series of photos. He laid them across the table, one by one, as if I was supposed to recognize something in them. The photos were grim, showing a man, Peter Granger, I assumed, his face a twisted mask of death. There was blood. So much blood. The images made my stomach lurch, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Do you recognize him? Andrews asked, his voice low. I shook my head. No, I don't. My breath felt shallow. How could I recognize a man whose name I didn't even know? You don't. He sounded almost disappointed, like I was failing some unspoken test. There's a problem here, Ms. Monroe. You were seen leaving his apartment building early yesterday morning. You were seen entering it late last night. My heart skipped a beat. What? I didn't. How could you know that? He slid another photo across the table, this one showing a surveillance camera still from the building's entrance. It was grainy, but clear enough to make out the figure of a woman, me unmistakably, walking into the building. My eyes widened in shock. That's impossible, I muttered, staring at the image. I don't remember any of this. I don't remember going there. Andrews watched me carefully, as if measuring every word I said. That's the problem, isn't it? You don't remember. I swallowed hard, trying to calm my racing heart. The images on the table seemed to blur as my head spun. Everything was slipping further and further out of my grasp. I had no memory of any of it. How could I be walking into a building, doing things I couldn't recall, and still be innocent? He gave a heavy sigh and closed the folder. You've been lying to us, Lena. You were there. You were seen. You have blood on your hands. We have your prints at the scene. And yet, you sit here, telling me you don't remember a thing. You're either lying, or your memory is playing tricks on you. I shook my head, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. I'm not lying. I don't know what happened. I didn't kill anyone. The harsh edge in Andrew's voice softened, just a little. I don't know if you did either. But you need to start being honest with yourself. The longer you play this game of forgetfulness, the more it works against you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out, to tear apart the tangled web of lies and confusion that had wrapped itself around me. But I couldn't. The fear in my chest was suffocating, and I didn't know how to fight back. I was alone in this, and the more I tried to explain myself, the more it seemed like I was digging a deeper hole. I don't even know where to start, I whispered, my voice cracking. I don't remember anything. Please, just tell me what happened. Please. Andrews didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, he stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He gathered the photos from the table and slid them back into the folder, looking at me one last time. Then figure it out, Lena, he said, his voice hard again. Before someone else does. With that, he walked out, leaving me alone in the room once more. The door clicked shut, and I was left to process the weight of his words. Figure it out. But how could I? I had no memory of the night before, no clue what had happened. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was being framed for a crime I didn't commit. But why? Who was behind this, and what was their game? I didn't have answers, but I had to find them. Before they found me. The days after my interrogation blurred together. Time felt like it was slipping through my fingers, like sand in a strong wind, always moving but never in a way I could control. I spent most of my time locked in a small holding cell, my thoughts spinning in endless circles. The officers came and went, asking the same questions, showing me the same evidence, all while I continued to deny my involvement in a crime I couldn't even remember. But nothing made sense. The more I thought about it, the less I understood. If I was truly guilty, why didn't I remember anything? Why were there no clear answers, no explanations for what had happened? I was starting to question everything. Was I losing my mind? Was this some twisted game being played on me? Or was I just too afraid to face the truth? My cell door opened unexpectedly, interrupting my spiral of thoughts. I looked up, startled, to see a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, her face partially obscured by the shadow cast from the hallway light. She looked unfamiliar, but there was something about her that made me feel as if I should recognize her. Lena Monroe? She asked, her voice low and calm. I nodded slowly, still unsure of who she was. Yes. Who are you? She stepped closer, her footsteps soft against the concrete floor. My name is Evelyn. I'm not here to interrogate you. I'm here to help. I raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping into my thoughts. Help? Why would you want to help me? Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a seat across from me, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, as though she could see right through me. I know what's going on, she said quietly. And I know you didn't kill Peter Granger. But you're tangled in something much bigger than you realize. And if you don't start paying attention, they'll make sure you're blamed for everything. My stomach clenched at the mention of Peter's name. How did she know about him? How did she know I was involved? You're not from the police, I said, my voice tinged with suspicion. Who are you really? Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. Let's just say I've been following this case for a while. I know more than you think. And right now, I need you to listen carefully. I had no idea what to think or how to react. My mind was still in turmoil, trying to make sense of the chaos that had become my life. But there was something about her, something in her eyes, that made me want to trust her, even if I had no reason to. I'm listening, I said, my voice hoarse. She nodded, taking a breath. You've been framed, Lena. Someone is making sure you take the fall for something you didn't do. You're caught in a web of lies, and it's getting tighter. If you don't act fast, it'll be too late. I blinked, trying to process her words. But how? Why me? I don't even remember anything. How could I be framed if I don't know what happened? Evelyn gave me a soft, almost pitying smile. It's not about your memory, Lena. It's about what they want you to believe. They've been planting clues, manipulating you, and the more you doubt yourself, the more they control the narrative. But you have to stop doubting yourself. You didn't kill anyone. You didn't even know Peter Granger. Her words were like a lifeline thrown into the darkness, but they raised more questions than they answered. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I was surrounded by people who seemed convinced of my guilt, and now a stranger was telling me I was innocent. But who was she really? And why was she helping me? How do you know all of this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn stood up, her movements deliberate. I can't explain everything right now, but I'll help you. You'll need to dig into your past, Lena. Look for the clues they don't want you to find. If you do that, you'll discover who's behind all of this. But you can't wait too long. Time is running out. I wanted to ask more questions, but Evelyn didn't give me the chance. She turned toward the door, pausing for a moment as though to say something more, but she remained silent. Then, with a final glance, she stepped out of the room, leaving me alone once more. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything she had said. Someone was framing me. Someone wanted me to believe I was guilty. But why? And how? The questions swirled in my mind, but one thing was clear. Evelyn had given me a sliver of hope. For the first time since everything started, I wasn't sure I was as guilty as I thought. I had to believe there was more to this story. I had to believe that somewhere, hidden in my forgotten memories, was the truth. And I was going to find it. The days dragged by in a haze. My cell, once a quiet refuge of sorts, had become a cage. The same questions, the same evidence, the same accusations, everything blurred into one long, suffocating ordeal. My mind felt like a puzzle with missing pieces, and I was no closer to finding them than I had been when they first brought me in. But I couldn't forget what Evelyn had said. Her words echoed in my mind, a constant whisper in the background of my thoughts. You've been framed, Lena. Someone is making sure you take the fall for something you didn't do. I didn't know who to trust anymore, but the doubt gnawing at me felt different. I wasn't sure if it was a new wave of hope or just desperation, but there was something about Evelyn's visit that had shifted something inside me. I was no longer convinced I was guilty. I had to be innocent. There had to be an explanation, even if I couldn't remember it. The interrogation room felt more oppressive than ever when Detective Andrews arrived that morning. His expression was as hard as stone, but I noticed the faint lines of frustration at the corners of his eyes, as if he were beginning to doubt himself. We need to talk, Lena, he said flatly, motioning for me to stand. I complied, my hands trembling as I followed him down the hall. This time, he led me to a different room. A small table sat in the center, a few folders stacked neatly on top. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. I could feel the pressure building, like the weight of everything pressing down on me. I sat down, the metal chair scraping against the floor, and Andrews sat across from me, pushing the folders toward me. Let's get something clear, he began, folding his arms. I've been patient with you, but this charade has gone on long enough. The evidence is overwhelming, Lena. Your fingerprints are all over Granger's apartment. Your blood was found at the scene. And your story keeps changing. It's time to stop pretending you don't know what happened. My heart pounded in my chest. I told you, I don't remember. I don't know what happened. Andrews leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. I don't believe you. I could feel the walls closing in again, that familiar sense of panic rising. I'm not lying, I pleaded. I swear to you. I don't know anything. I don't remember anything from the night before. I don't know how I got there. The silence between us stretched long. Andrews just stared at me, his expression unwavering. I couldn't tell if he was waiting for me to crack, to break and finally admit my guilt. But I wasn't going to do that. I couldn't. "You're a smart woman, Lena," he said after what felt like an eternity. "You know what happens when people get caught in lies. You can't keep up this act forever. You'll break eventually." I wanted to scream, to tell him that I wasn't lying, that I hadn't done anything. But my throat was tight, the words trapped inside. Instead, I pushed the folders back toward him, my hands shaking. "You want the truth?" I said, my voice hoarse. "The truth is, I don't know what happened. The truth is, I'm not guilty. You've got it all wrong." Andrews stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, without saying another word, he stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me once again alone. As I sat there, alone with my thoughts, the weight of everything pressed down on me. The pieces of my life, my memories, were scattered, and I was struggling to put them together. But I had to. I had to remember. I had to find the truth before they decided I was guilty, before they locked me away for a crime I didn't commit. I had no answers, but I was more determined than ever to find them. And that's the end of part 1 of The Weight of Innocence. If you're as hooked as we are, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss part 2 when it drops. Got thoughts or theories? Drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think really happened. And if you want bonus content in a shorter form like Reels, please give us a follow on Instagram at StoryStream. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.